I'm joined by founder, a leader, tracking football, Mark Branstad. Mark is a good friend, and man, I've been following what they've been doing for over a year now. And man, every once in a while I see a tweet pop up, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy, he ran 10-4 over here, he jumped this, and I'm going, goodness me, man, the database continues to grow, and business continues to seem like it's going well. How is it going, Mark?
It is going well. Yeah, as always, we're sort of data nerds. We're always plugging information into our database. We're up close to 100,000 players at this point, but wow. Business is going well. We're continuing to grow at the college level. We've got just over 30 teams in FBS, got a couple of FCS teams, and our big deal for us is we just recently broke into the NFL. We've got a couple teams now that are actually we're piping data straight into their process. So that's been really exciting for us, and obviously the combine's coming up this next week. So we're pretty excited about that.
Well, congratulations, man! Like seriously, that's not a small thing, especially knowing what you guys thought this could be, and it feels like at some level it's exceeding your expectations.
Yeah, it's constantly changing, and obviously with analytics and everything, it's constantly changing. But I think one of the areas we've gotten some traction is with technology now you can kind of zoom data around everywhere, and we've gotten a couple of NFL teams that are open to that, and kind of our take on the way that we look at football athleticism, our scores. We've gotten some traction with the colleges, and we still need to grow in that area, but it's not really a job. It's a lot of fun coming into the office every day.
Right on, man. Well, I reached out to you to ask you if you could talk with me a bit about some guys that are going to participate in the NFL Combine that starts on Sunday, February 23rd, goes through March 2nd. The SEC once again dominates with the number of invitees, 93. I believe the next closest Power 5 conference is B1G, Big Ten, with I want to say 54. I mean, a number of guys coming in out of there. Are there guys in that conference that stand out to you with a PAI of 4 or higher? And again, if you could, please explain for the folks what that is and what the difference is between evaluating football athleticism and what sports go into basically generating this number and being a really great predictor of athletic success on a football field.
Yeah, so it's kind of our foundation, our standard score is called the Player Athletic Index, which is short for PAI. And really all that is it's really pretty simple. It takes a player's height, a player's weight, and if he does track and field, his track performance. And that's also for, linemen that throw a shot and disc, for skill guys if they hurdle, run relays, and obviously the sprints and the jumps. So, we can get a good cross-section of football players and positions to score with the PAI. And really it's a body type, power, speed score. And it's a good predictor because, track and field data, you can go way back and compare it apples to apples. It's a little harder to do that with combine data, especially for high school kids, because standardized combine events didn't really happen until, maybe at the furthest 15 years ago, really more like 10. But you can reach back, 20, 30 years with track data, find it readily available. And if you can get the body type, you can score these guys, and it's really pretty objective. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean if they have a really high score, they're going to be a great football player. But certainly that score tends to translate to football athleticism. And we all know the better athletes tend to gravitate towards the higher levels of football. So
100%. And I've called it min-maxing, where you might find a kiddo that was extremely fast and you'll teach him to play football, or you'll know that this kiddo can stand up in a different way than some others. Like, for instance, I'll throw one out as a 2021 quarterback. His name is Caden Salter. Top 247 recruiting rankings has him as the #1 quarterback in the state of Texas. But when I found out he ran the 300 hurdles and he jumped, I said, okay, he's a little bit stronger than most kids, because running 300 hurdles is not for the faint of heart, man. That takes a different kind of mindset and a different kind of body type, quite honestly. So the idea of him being able to stand up to the pressures of football week in and week out speaks a little bit differently than somebody who perhaps did not. I would also pivot to that to say, I'm going to just ask this question. Are there guys that are in the combine or going through the combine that ran hurdles, that went through the 400, the tougher sprint endurance races?
Sure. Yeah, there are quite a few guys that ran the hurdles proficiently. Actually, in the SEC, Christian Fulton, the cornerback from LSU, was a good hurdler. And really, hurdles is an indication of speed, but even more so, it indicates coordination. Coordination and balance, which maybe if you have that in spades, is even more important than just top end speed. So and like you said, the 300 hurdles, the intermediates, is a little bit more of an endurance race, but certainly, it shows the level of coordination, and maybe an intangible is, kind of a want to. That's a tough race, kind of like running the 400 meters, a quarter mile. You kind of have to want to do that. So it's a little tough to do. So, there's a little bit of an intangible there too.
Were there guys that stood out to you coming out of high school that you project to do well at these underwear Olympics?
Yeah. So, we do track the combine data, and there's so many of them now, that do it at a big level, like the opening and rivals and all those things. So we track all that data, and usually it corresponds to the track performance. Now, obviously, there are some kids that go to these big combines, do well, and they don't do track. But most of the time, it correlates. So if a guy's got a high PAI, we also have a combine score, which is virtually the same thing. We just substitute combine data. They usually correlate pretty well. Usually you don't see a guy go to a combine event in high school and do terribly, and then he's a state champion, long jumper or 100-meter guy. That doesn't usually happen. So they do tend to correlate. There's crossover there.
Right on. Who are some of the guys that we should watch for to perform well? I could throw some names at you, like CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy at the top end, guys like T. Higgins, for instance. And how much success do you think they might have with having that background in track and field?
Yeah, so I think you start with everybody this is kind of all over Twitter and all over social media. You got to start with those Alabama, that receiving core. Obviously a guy like Henry Ruggs is really sort of the odds-on favorite maybe to challenge, John Ross's record of 4.22. And Ruggs was a legit 10.42 guy. So definitely Ruggs has got it. Jerry Jeudy, another really, really fast guy. I think one guy that's I have to bring up would be Devin Duvernay from Texas.
Okay, yeah.
He was a 10.27 guy. Troy Pride is a guy that actually from the Senior Bowl got brought up quite a bit, who was a corner for Notre Dame. He was a big-time track athlete in high school, but he ran collegiately too. So he's another guy that may surprise a few people. Guys like CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, a little bit taller guys. It's a little hard to tell sometimes. And, we may or may not have specific track data points on them. But certainly if you watch the film, CeeDee Lamb certainly looks like he could go on that.
100%. I wonder, going to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl here, because Raheem Mostert was taking that whole week by storm. And I was like, hey, man, I'm watching that guy run straight out of the Big Ten, and he's having to convince people. I played football since I was 7. I ran track because somebody asked me to. I'm not a track guy, and I'm going, hey, ease up on the track guys, man, because just because you could show up and be 200-plus pounds and run a blazing fast time doesn't mean somebody else didn't really want to do that. So I wondered how much people might bring his story to you, and you'd be like, yeah, those guys are everywhere, we've been tracking them.
Yeah. So Mostert was he was a guy that we had data on since high school. So we knew, his PAI is really high because he's kind of a height, weight, speed guy. And he didn't really, have a ton of success, or maybe he was underutilized at Purdue. And I think I saw during the Super Bowl, they said he bounced around to 7 different NFL teams before he found his home with the Niners. And the Niners just have the perfect, scheme for him. But he's a guy that in college was, he was a really, really fast sprinter. And they've really been able to connect with him with the Niners, as kind of that one cut back. And with his speed, it's really kind of been the perfect storm. It's a really cool story. And you got to wonder how many guys, maybe didn't get enough opportunities in the league that have those kind of, physical skills and that speed. Man,
and I think about the kids that pass it up on the other side. Like, I came up with a guy named Trendon Holiday who returned kicks at LSU, who's also, holding it down for the short guys. And I remember, he had an opportunity to compete for an Olympic spot. And he said, no, I'm going to go to preseason camp. And I said, wait a second, what? And I think on that same team was Xavier Carter, who was tremendous as a 400-meter guy. And I think LSU set a collegiate record when he was anchoring the 400.
I believe I believe you're right. Yeah, I think they set the 1600-meter relay record, which may at this point have been broken. But yeah, I think you're correct. And yeah, X-Man was a big time 400-meter guy, and I know kind of briefly played wideout at LSU. And I remember Trendon Holiday being, like you said, kind of putting one up there for the small guys, but was a heck of a kick returner at the NFL, and really it was an awfully good running back, if I remember, for LSU, despite being 5'5" or something like that.
Yeah, no, right on the nose at 5'5", and I was going to see we can do this stuff. It ain't just Darren Sproles. There's a few of us out there. And there are a couple of other guys that I wanted to bring up here briefly. Marques Goodwin being one who jumped at Texas. I don't know that he's going to try to compete for a spot on the Tokyo Team USA team, but a guy that had kind of thrown it out there was Tyreek Hill, and I was going, you might be just a little too big to do that right now, and I don't know how that's gonna help you with your NFL career, because that's where your money is now. But it's an interesting proposition.
Yeah, it is, and it's I think what some people don't take into account. I mean, I think his PR in the 100 meters was like a 10. Well, actually it was sub 10, but I think it was wind dated. But anyway,
right.
His best time ever, is really solid on the international stage. But I don't think what most of the public thinks about is the process, to get to the Olympics as a sprinter. There's a series of trials and everything else. And, you really, your stamina and your training have to be up to par, because you're running multiple times. So even though his PR, might stack up to, hey, he could get into the final heat at the Olympics, he would have to go through the process first. And, to your point, RJ, he'd probably have to train in a different way that may actually be, maybe a bit of a negative to his football career. So, tough to tell. He's certainly really fast, and it would be fascinating to see, but it might be, like you said, a little impractical.
Oh, man. And I give that to most people. It's like, hey, there are these things called heats, and you're not assured any of them. They're great world-class sprinters that just have a bad race. I think another guy that I would bring up in this conversation is Devin Allen, who chose, I think, rightly to pursue the 110s. And I think he just finished just short of making the last World Championships outdoor finals, if I have this correct. Okay. All right. But is another guy that was outstanding at Oregon as a wideout, and also just big, strong, and fast. And that was the part that I wanted to actually pivot to. Is there's some guys that I think are fringe football players that could be world-class sprinters, and the idea of being able to pursue both is something they kind of back off on because they think they should be specializing. Do you have an opinion about what some guys should be doing, especially if a track coach thinks that they have the goods to compete at the collegiate level?
Yeah, so, at the collegiate level, I think Auburn might be a good example of there's some high, sort of well-known names there, Shivers and Anthony Schwartz that are, I think that they had a corner, that long jump, and he's actually at the combine this year, that all did track, and they were able to make that kind of work, sharing athletes. I always think that's a great thing. I know in this day and age, it's really hard to do. But so credit to those guys, credit to those coaching staffs that want to work together. I know specifically like Tennessee does a pretty good job with that. Coach Pruitt's staff and that track staff do a pretty good job there. I personally, I love to see it, maybe I'm a little greedy, but I think it's really hard, and it's kind of an athlete's choice. And then obviously got to work with the staffs, but it's awfully hard for those guys to do this day and age, especially, with the rigors of both sports and then the academics. But you love to see it. And professionally, I think Bo Jackson was saying, not too long ago that being a multi-sport professional athlete almost this day and age is almost impossible. Like he had said that basically if he were around today trying to do that, he couldn't. So I don't know how practical it is to do it on a professional level.
Right. And I think that's also worth taking into account. But I wanted to finish with this. I don't know. You probably got this note, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I spoke with a high school football coach not too long ago. Ed Orgeron had come to see, and he said, do your football players run track? He says, yeah, some of them. Okay, those are the ones I really want. And I took a look at the roster over there at LSU, and I saw 10-second 100-meter guy, 10-second 100-meter guy, 10-second 100-meter guy, thrower, shot put, jab in high school, like, which is becoming unheard of, quite honestly. And I was going, oh, okay, that explains a lot. And that's, to me, what I thought was the greatest college football team of all time. I don't apologize for that, but I thought that was worth pointing out, that if Ed Orgeron shows up and then his second question is which ones run track, then we know everything we need to know about whether or not this is a sport that you should be participating in as a kiddo.
Yeah, LSU, they do a great job of recruiting athletes. And then, as you saw this year, of really kind of making those athletes across positions, fit the system, or the other way around, making the system work towards the athletes that they have. But they're huge on recruiting multi-sport guys and track athletes. And as you said, the results speak for themselves. And I know Alabama does that as well. And, maybe some of these other football programs would be, well suited to at least take a look at the template. It seems to be working.
Last question I had for you was, what do you think the future of what you're doing with track and football is going to look like here in the next 5 years?
Oh, great question. I think what we're kind of seeing is kind of what we're doing with the NFL now, that I think will, because a lot of that stuff usually gravitates down. I think what's going to happen is it's going to be more of, because we have a website that, college recruiters can get on and so on and so forth. But I think where things are going is sort of more what they just call like data distribution, where, I don't know that we're going to get rid of our website, but I think it's more of just direct data. I mean, we put it into this template and it just gets sent to them, and then they decide what they want to do, and they have their analytics people crunch those numbers on their own. And I think that the college staffs will start to get people like that more and more, to where the data is going to come into them, but they're going to be the ones that are going to, do the analysis and decide what's important and what's not, rather than tracking football having the data and sort of giving them the analytics. I think that's going to be the future.
Wow. So just give us the raw that you guys have combed the country over to go find.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? Do you like the crunching of the numbers? Do you?
I think that, to me, it started as a hobby. So I kind of like doing the research. I mean, of course, we kind of like doing the analytical side too. But I think that as these football staffs get more and more comfortable with that part of it, and it's just a part. It's not, obviously there's a lot more, obviously, to assembling a football team and recruiting than just knowing whether he's a great athlete or not. But I do think that it will go more in-house, as we'd say, as time goes along. Now, that's not going to happen next year, but 5-6 years down the road, I think you'll see a lot more college staffs with analytics people and maybe even mathematicians and stuff like that.
Right on. Mark, is there anything that you want to talk about that I didn't bring up?
I just wanted to mention a couple guys. You kind of said, who we might expect to do well. And
right.
Just based on the numbers, I'll kind of stay away maybe from people that are really well known, or that, kind of Twitter's blown up about, hey, this guy's going to do real well. But a guy from Utah, Javelin Guidry, was a 6'59", 60-meter sprinter. And for those out there, even collegiately, that's really fast. So I would expect if Javelin's healthy, and he's got a good day, he could run the 40 real fast. So I would certainly be on the lookout when you hear that name, when he lines up for the 40. I think there's a guy from TCU, Jalen Reagor, was I think is a receiver for TCU. He was a 26-foot long jumper in high school, and that is unbelievably far for a high school athlete. Yeah, so I would expect that for the vert and the broad jump, he'll probably blow it up. And I always mispronounce this guy's name, but he's from Auburn. Igbinogi, I think his name is, Noah. He's a corner from Auburn. I think I just butchered his name. Sorry about that. But his parents were Olympic athletes, actually, and he jumped collegiately at Auburn. And he's a guy that also can run pretty fast, but I would expect, he's going to jump out of the gym. And then, of course, everybody's talking about it, but Isaiah Simmons as a linebacker, who knows what he's going to do, but I think it's going to be fun to watch.
No, 100%. And that was a guy that flew under so many radars because he just didn't participate in much else other than in football and didn't go to camps. You mentioned parents of were Olympians. I wrote this down. Chuba Hubbard had 2,000-yard rushing season, and the thing that I tried to keep stressing to people was, no, you don't understand. This kid was in the IAA youth finals. Like, he's really, really fast, and now he's big and fast, and he had the season that he had last year. So I wondered if you had anything to offer on that side of things, because I know that coming out of Canada, everybody's like, Canadian football, what do you want? Did you see the speed? I want to say he dropped like 10.34 when he was like 16.
Yeah. I think they made mention too that at the time he was like 175 or 180 pounds. As you point out, he's a lot bigger, but it seems like, he's probably carried a lot of that speed over, at least probably to the 40s. So, but yeah, he's a Canadian guy. And actually, I'll do a shameless plug here.
Please.
We are partnered with a group called Canada Football Chat. They do the only high school all-star game in Canada. They do a great job. It's on TSN, the Fox affiliate nationally. But anyway, so we get a lot of Canadian data now on high school kids. And, yeah, there are some burners up there, I'll tell you. But Chuba's a stud, and it would have been interesting if he'd have been at the Combine this year, but we'll see him next year. And I agree with you. He may run 4.3 at 210 pounds or whatever.
Man, another Canadian kiddo that I think is going to have a great combine, Neville Gallimore, was always on Bruce Feldman's freak list. Like, he was listed at 335, running 4.7. I said, I got to see the 4.7. But if he runs fast, it's going to be hard not to see that guy go vault into the first round.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to test well across the board. Probably for, big athlete like that, he's going to jump really well too, comparatively, and probably is going to do well in the agility tests from what the numbers say and what people are talking. That, yeah, he's one of those big guys that may blow it up.
Right on. It's Mark Branstad of Tracking Football. Give them a follow. Give him a follow. Check them out. I'm going to link in the description below where you can find all of their information, and it's been really fun to watch the business grow, Mark, and thank you for taking some time, man.
Hey, RJ, great, man. Appreciate it. Always good coming on, chopping it up. Let's do it another time soon.
Yes, sir.